what I was thinking about today? I was thinking about when you find that good deal at shopping market, right? When you go in and you see something and it's for some reason, whatever it is, maybe it's they have excess of the amount of produce of it is, maybe they're trying to sell it before they run out or whatever the deal is. But you look at it and you're like, man, that price doesn't add up. I should be getting that at substantially more than it's worth. This is what we're talking about. Would you sale shopping or dirt cheap options or when you see discrepancy in the market. And this is kind of what I wanted to focus on. And we're going to get into the players here in a minute. But it's an overall strategy with how we look at Dynasty and the ever evolving landscape of Dynasty and how it compares to Redraft, where we talk about these massive year windows when we talk about like quarterbacks and wide receivers and even tight ends to a point. But running backs, we like to view them in a 1, 2, maybe 3-year window at most. And a lot of times we're overvaluing these younger running backs because we talk about how long they have to play. But realistically, if they don't produce, does that matter? So that's what I wanted to get into on this show of the Fantasy Lowdown. I wanted to talk about really discrepancy in redrafted dynasty market and highlighting some either undervalued younger running backs or some undervalued older, like aging out running backs and guys that can be the discounted options where they give you the production of, say, Kyron Williams last year or Raheem Mostert last year were guys that you were not spending premium capital on. But when you look back at the end of the season, like you had a good deal. And this happens to a lot of guys, and this happens every year. So we're gonna try to highlight a few guys that we like on this year and make the bull case for each of those guys for you. So stick with me as we hop in on some discounted league winning running backs for 2024. Now, for running backs in general, there is this like overwhelming consensus of you want these truly elite running backs position. You want the Christian McCaffreys, you want the Jahmyr Gibbs, you want the Breece Halls, you want the Bijan Robinsons. But like outside of those guys, there's maybe a handful of guys, and you could say it's Jonathan Taylor if you want to make the case. He's kind of aging out. Devon Achane, he's a little bit younger, but people are bullish on him. And then once we get outside those top 5 really dynasty running backs, the market kind of is a pick your poison, and it really highlights. We get into like the James Cook, we get into guys in sketchier situations where maybe they were bad last year and they're rebounding into a new situation, Josh Jacobs. And then we kind of like get out of that dynasty landscape. We start adding in the older guys. So this will talk about some of these older aging running backs, right? Which will be like maybe a Derrick Henry or a Joe Mixon, or we push it back to Alvin Kamara, like these guys that are older. But when you look at redraft rankings, they're way higher in redraft than they are in dynasty. And that shows you a market discrepancy, because if you're not really worried about the 3-year window for running backs, then why are these guys valued so low? Because if you're trying to win, which you should be trying to win every year, if you have a roster that is already in a situation where you're in a contender and you're set up where you have good pieces all around, and maybe you need a running back here, or you want to like insulate that roster with one more contender piece, these are the guys I wanted to focus on this week. Because last week we talked about the wide receivers and how the wide receiver market is overpopulated, that when you look at it, it's kind of a bubble. And at some point, like, I know we love drafting all these wide receivers, but at some point the market is going to adjust, because realistically, say you're paying a second round pick for, I don't know, Jalen Polk or whoever it is, right? And what you need from that second round to pay off is like you need that guy to be an impact asset. But what's the likelihood of that player being an impact asset? And we talk about these wide receivers being, they have a longer leash, or they're going to be. That's not really true. Like, we're looking at T. Higgins right now, who's one of the better wide receivers in Dynasty. He's a good wide receiver. He's not a great wide receiver, but he's on that fringe where he's really good. It also applies to like a George Pickens and these type of players where they're good players. Situations are setting up well for them. But like, what's their value worth? Can you even get a first round pick from them? In some leagues you can't. So what it really shows us is that we're getting sharper in Dynasty, and we're kind of like, we're figuring out the market as we move along. And outside of truly elite wide receivers, like I kind of want to do that with every position. I want to either consolidate into the high-end truly elite assets, or get the guys that are going to give me the production that are older. So this applies to like a wide receiver position like a Devontae Adams or players like that, right? Or if you view Stephon Diggs that way, or if you view these older like Keenan Allen, these wide receivers who maybe they give you that production. Like I think Adams is the most likely of that bunch. But I want to talk about these running backs in general. So We're going to hop into our first guy. And give me 1 second to pull this up because it's actually pretty fun. Now that's not Rhamondre. Sorry, it's all out of order. We're out of whack here. We've gone off the rails. It's Derrick Henry, folks. This is the guy I want to talk about. Now, as you can see right here, it's Derrick Henry. And by the way, I'm using Dynasty Data Lab ADP because I love what Dynasty Data Lab does. It's really easily. You can use Dynasty Data. You can do any one of these websites. But what I like about Dynasty Data Lab is they take actual data from sleeper leagues, which is what these are real leagues that people are taking part of, and they're looking track of the startup ADP and trades and things of that nature. So this is a 7th round pick, RB16. What I wanted to focus on is the guys outside the top 6 rounds, really, in Dynasty and Superflex Dynasty leagues, because once you get outside that, that's kind of where the truly elite guys go. From about round 1 to about round 4 is where you get the elites, mainly round 3. Round 4 to about round 6 is that second tier of guys where it's guys that have the potential. So you see a lot of these guys like Zay Flowers and these type of players like Xavier Worthy's in there where they have the potential to jump up and they're young enough, they'll get the boost. Once we get outside the top 6 round, this is kind of where the older players kind of linger in the round 6 to about round 9. It's the guys that are going to give you immediate production this year or that we're expecting to give immediate production, but there's issues with their profile or they're older, whatever it is. But this is kind of, so you're paying for their production and you're not necessarily paying for the value because once we get into this is what I'll talk about the running backs. And my whole thought process is once we get outside the truly elite, so maybe the top 5 running backs, really, why are we paying, say, maybe it's James Cook, who I love James Cook, but maybe you don't view him that way. Maybe it's Ken Walker, or maybe it's pick your running back outside the elite guys, Josh Jacobs, whoever you want to pick. Maybe it's a James Conner, right? Why are certain guys, because of youth, valued so highly, even though they're not going to give you that production? Like, for instance, let's focus on Ken Walker for a second. Compare him to Derrick Henry. How many points per game do you think Derrick Henry is going to outscore Ken Walker for this year and likely next year? Because if you do projections and you project out Ken Walker, you're like, he's going to be between 12 points per game and 15 points per game, 15 being the high end, 12 being the low end. The issue is he has Charbonnet, and if he doesn't get that receiving work, it's really hard for him because the role is not there. So why am I paying a premium for Ken Walker when I can move back multiple rounds? Like we talk about Walker, he goes way earlier in drafts. And why I'm highlighting him is because like Walker's one of those guys that profiles that scares crap out of me. I think he's a good back, but you're basically paying for a borderline RB2 for years at a time. And my thought process is, does that player matter for you in Dynasty? Why are you paying that premium for that guy when you could theoretically, like you could move off of Walker, you could likely get an early 2nd round pick and you could get a Derrick Henry added on to that, right? And guess what? The team with Derrick Henry this year is going to absolutely smash. I mean, obviously, there's a little bit issue with, age and possible injuries, which we saw with Derrick Henry last year. But in the situation he's in, I mean, unless you're a big Rasheen Ali guy or someone along those natures, there's really no one to challenge Derrick Henry in this offense, right? So with Lamar running one of the best offenses in the NFL, they have Zay Flowers, they have Mark Andrews, but Derrick Henry, they've talked about. They want to feature him like they do in Tennessee, like they did in Tennessee for the years. This is what Harbaugh's talked about. Like they love Derrick Henry. And when you think of like a prototypical Raven, I don't think there's anybody that reminds me more of a Raven than Derrick Henry. Like he fits the build of what they want to do. They're going to absolutely just hand him the rock and say, Derrick Henry, lead us the way. The most interesting thing I think with when we talk about these efficient, like scrambling quarterbacks, and this is why I really like Henry at his cost compared to some of these other guys, particularly when I was looking at redraft prices, I looked at Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley, and I'm like, those guys are going a round and a half earlier than Derrick Henry, and I don't understand why. Like, what's the upside that those guys offer? Is it more pass catching upside? Maybe it's a little bit with Jonathan Taylor and maybe a little bit with Saquon Barkley, but it doesn't make up the difference in Henry because what those two guys have a problem is those quarterbacks are going to steal goal line work for them. That's not going to happen from Derrick Henry. So Lamar, the last 3 years, he has had 15 rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line. Jalen Hurts had 16 attempts last year. The year before that, he had 14. These are like the differences, and these make a huge difference on basically we talk about touchdowns. Touchdowns are super important. So when they get down to the goal line, who do you think is going to get that work? Are you going to give it to Lamar, who's a frail, like skinnier quarterback they signed to a bunch of money? Do you really want to like pay him out of the boat and you do that? Or do you want to give it to Derrick Henry? And it just makes sense, right? Like, wouldn't you want to give it to Derrick Henry? I would want to give it to Derrick Henry. If I'm running team, I'm like, yeah, let's hand it to Derrick Henry. Let this guy cook behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Now, the one stat I did want to highlight with Derrick Henry is last year they had in Tennessee, they had one of the worst yards before contact created for offensive line, and it severely hampered Henry. The last 4 years, the Ravens have been first in the NFL at yards before contact created for their running backs because Henry was still a top 10 back in yards after contact. So this is the thing with Derrick Henry. Like, he's a freaking stud. So with Derrick Henry, you're getting a guy in a really good offense who's still a really good running back. And I mean, the pass catching's really never been there. He might give you 20, 30 catches this year, which you take that. You say, cool, thanks, Henry. That's great. But that's not really what we're paying Derrick Henry for. What we're doing is we're hoping Henry hits that ceiling because he could lead the league in touchdowns this year. Like, seriously, Derrick Henry could lead the league in touchdowns. I'm going to keep saying that. There's a chance he goes 20 plus, like similar to Raheem Mostert last year. He could be a top 5 running back again for you. And if we're talking about as a 7th round startup pick, as a, like an early to mid 2nd round pick, like on a team that's a contender and you need to make that push, like Derrick Henry is. This is what the Dynasty Trades and 5 guys talk about is a hammer. That's Derrick Henry. I don't care because we're playing in these short-term windows with running back. So I think we kind of over insulate the younger backs, but this is the issue. And this is also the same thing with wide receivers. These younger wide receivers, if they're not going to give you similar production, if you're taking a significant hit, just give me the older guy and I'll live with that. Now it's nice when you insulate the deals, like I talked about with Ken Walker earlier. If you're giving me an early 2nd Derrick Henry for Ken Walker, yeah, smash all day. Give me Derrick Henry because I'm getting the pick that insulates my squad, and then I'm getting the production on top of it. And this is what I mean. Like you could make these moves when you look at startup ADP and see like the difference. You're like, why does he go here and why does he go here? And like it really doesn't make sense. And this is the thing I've always asked. So like, why does this guy in particular? We'll focus on Walker again. Like he's going multiple rounds. Right? Walker's going in the mid, like early 5th round. Derrick Henry is going in the like middle of the 7th round, like early to middle of 7th. That's 2 rounds below. Now the market's gotten a little bit sharper on this. This also applies to like a Travis Etienne, who I think is really overvalued because his situation is not that great. The offensive line is been one of the worst in the NFL. So with Travis Etienne, you're getting the volume, but like if it's not efficient, does it matter? And if we look at redraft, Derrick Henry goes above a guy like Etienne. It's like, all right, well, if he goes above a guy like Etienne, why is he that undervalued so much? So I think Derrick Henry, when you look at construction and team building, I get it, he's old. So you're not going to want to get him on a team that's old and on a team that's young and that's not contending because it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because his points will hurt you. But if you're a possible contender, like you look at your roster, you're maybe top 6 in a few positions. You got a good quarterback. You got good tight ends. Your wide receiver room solid. You just need a running back. Like Derrick Henry fits that team perfectly, right? And you build with Derrick Henry. You make a push in the playoffs and you see how it goes. The nice thing about it is you don't have to pay for a first-round pick for him. We were talking in one of the Discords earlier today, and somebody made the mention, yeah, like you go get Derrick Henry and you can sell him for a first in season. And I'm like, that's not why we're buying Derrick Henry. We're not buying Derrick Henry for value insulation to get a boost and selling in the in-season market. Like, it's possible, but in specifically, like he's an old running back. People just don't pay first-round running backs, right? So you might be able to get a little bit of value increase for him, but you're paying for the immediate production. The value increases, whatever. Like this is the type of guy you buy and they just die in your roster. After the 2025 season when he moves on from the Ravens or if they resign him again, you get 2 years with the Ravens and then it's kick rocks Derrick Henry. Like it was nice knowing you. You got my team to at least in the playoffs and possibly a championship. Like you did your job. You do what I needed to do. So I think Derrick Henry is the perfect buy on a contender where you're looking to maybe insulate your roster a little bit. You have like a, Bijan Robinson. Maybe you have, a middling back. You have like we'll say like a Najee Harris on that roster, and you have maybe another guy that's okay. If you get a Derrick Henry to like kind of insulate that roster where you have that hammer like we talk about, the guy that's going to be an immediate impact producer for you and then you pair it with Bijan and say if something happens to one of those guys, you have other guys that can give you decent production. That's kind of how you make it work in Dynasty. So that's why I've been so bullish on Derrick Henry. I think his skill set fits perfectly with what the Ravens want to do. The Ravens, like they're one of the better running teams in the NFL. They have been ever since Lamar. So Lamar's efficiency is going to open it up for Henry on top of it too. And Henry's always been an efficient back. Even last year, he was still an efficient back. Like his tackles for, breakaway run rate, none of that stuff was really diminished for Derrick Henry. He was still good. So this is why I like Derrick Henry. Now, there are a couple guys that are a little bit older. There are also some younger backs in this, what I wanted to do. But these are still like the certified contender backs where age I'm not too worried about. And this is also my second guy. So I'm going to jump on to little Mr. Joe Mixon here and talk about. He's my second guy I'll talk about. So Joe Mixon's a little bit cheaper than Derrick Henry. He's RB19. In startups, he goes the late 7th. It's still likely going to cost you early 2nd. Maybe it's a mid-2nd. The thing with Joe Mixon is they have no competition. You want to tell me who the RB2 is on that team? Like Jawar Jordan? No, thank you. Damian Pierce. We saw what happened last year with Bobby Slug. This is why Singletary came in. He was just the better back because guess what? He fit the scheme what they wanted to do. Now, the thing about Mixon is he has been a guy who has seen a ton of volume. Now, the interesting thing is Derrick Henry has had 270-ish touches in his career per season. The thing with Mixon is he's averaging 264 touches per per season. And this includes a little bit of injuries. If you wanted to scale it per 17 games, he's basically at 325 touches. Now, he's never been the most efficient back. He's always been in like his yards per attempt. His average is 4.1. Last year he was at 4. The last 3 years he's been 4.1, 3.9, and 4. Now it's interesting, like his targets have gotten better as they moved on from Gio Bernard. They didn't really have anybody else, and I know people like Chase Brown, but guess what? Mixon had a ton of targets last year. He had 75 targets in 2022. He had 64 last year. Now it might not be there with the offense because the difference between Cincinnati and Houston is Houston has more depth. They have Diggs, they have Tank Dell, and they have Nico Collins, which might possibly be one of the top 3 wide receiver rooms, top 5 at worst, because I think Nico Collins is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I think Tank Dell is one of the better young wide receivers in the NFL. And then you have an aging veteran and Stephon Diggs, who's still good. Now, the interesting thing with Mixon is like, it's strictly a volume play. And we saw with Cincinnati, they were happy to reward him. And I think this is the thing we talk about, and this was like with Leonard Fournette for the longest time in the NFL, is these guys, volume is a skill. It's an earned thing. Like, you have to be rewarded for whatever reason. This is what Mixon's done his entire career. Opportunity share's been there. Basically a snap share. It's all good for Mixon. So now it might be just a 1-year thing because of his contract and the way he's set up, and with the 2025 running back class coming in. But when you're buying Mixon, like same thing with Henry, you're not buying for a long term. You're buying for the now. So if he gives you 2 years, that's great, because what did they do? They signed him to a long-term contract. So that's what makes it interesting, right? With these contracts, it's not just a 1-year thing, right? So he's got a 3-year, $25 million deal with him. Now, interestingly enough, with Mixon, he's signed through 2026. Now, the way it works is like the dead cap hit is $13 million this year. It's $8 million next year, and the cap hit's $9 million. So it really doesn't save them any money until 2026, where it's a $2 million dead cap hit and $10 million cap hit. Now, you can make the case like they just wipe it away if he's really bad, similar to like what we see of Josh Jacobs last year, where the guy's just diminished, or Austin Eckler, right? Where, because he is older, he'll be 29 next year. But if he's the guy who he is, which, I mean, he hasn't really fallen off much. He's just kind of been that guy that's able to earn volume. And CJ Stroud offense, like, he's another guy that double-digit touchdowns fairly easy. You could project him for 50-plus targets. He's going to get work. So, like, worst case, he's a RB2 due to lack of efficiency. If that increases due to the offense and everything works out, you have yourself a guy who, a couple years ago, he was top 5 running back. He could be there again this year. And at the cost of the 7th-round starter pick and a like early to mid 2nd-round pick, it's fine. I know it sounds gross because it's like the difference between Joe Mixon and Derrick Henry is like people still love Derrick Henry. No one has ever really been like, I freaking love Joe Mixon. That's not what it is. But this is why he's cheaper, even though he's a little bit younger. You're still paying for the production. So, like, if we look at Mixon's entire career in Cincinnati, like, the guy's just put up work. He's gone over basically he's only had 2 seasons. He's gone under 1,255 all-purpose yards, right? So that was his rookie year. He put up 913 all-purpose yards. Then in 2020, he had injuries. He only played 6 games. He put up 566 yards. Now, if you want to go basically on like a per game basis, he's been averaging like 89 yards in his career per game. So it's not bad. Like, that's solid work. You know what you're getting, and you could narrow it down and look at it. But the way I look at Joe Mixon, like, I don't see anyone challenging him on that roster. If you could name somebody on that roster, then go for it. But like, this is why they brought in somebody, because we were talking about the Houston Texans roster looking like, all right, they need to sign somebody because they don't have much there. Like, unless you're a big Damian Pierce fan or Dare Oluwale, like JJ Taylor, it's really just guys. Like, and Mixon's clearly the best back there. Now, you could make a case that Mixon sucks at pass blocking. Sure, his pass blocking is not great, but like, it's good enough where I don't think he's going to get taken off the field. So I think Mixon's another good contender buy, similar to Henry when you're looking at like your roster and going, all right, I don't want to pay the price for Henry. I can get Mixon a little bit cheaper. I'll go check. Like, what you should do with these type of players, these older backs. This also applies to Alvin Kamara, but I am a lot more worried about Alvin Kamara than I am these 2 backs, because I don't see anyone challenging these 2 guys. Kamara was hyper inefficient last year. He was awful. Like, he reminds me of Dalvin Cook, where the fall off happened. He still got the volume. The next year, basically, the team was like, nah, dude, we're like done with you. So the interesting thing is his contract is fat. That's kind of what's floating Alvin Kamara, and he's trying to push for a contract extension. Don't know what the hell he's talking about. Like, why, if you're the Saints, would you even entertain that? You're like, no, dude, you're already making top tier money. You're diminished. Like, I don't trust. So he worries me. And there's also someone on that roster, Kendry Miller. I think he's going to challenge them more. So that's why he's not a buy for me in that situation. I get it. Like he was RB3 last year. Like he lived off of volume. But man, he was not good. And I think with the OC change, it's going to hurt Kamara more than like we expected to. So he's the one I think is the most fragile out of these 3 guys in that range. And everyone's like, buy Alvin Kamara. And I'm like, dude, go get Henry, go get Mixon. I'm much more confident in what they're able to do. And they're going to give you similar production, if not better production. So those guys, I'm a little bit more confident than I am with that one. Now, the next one's a little bit interesting. I can't lie. He's a little bit younger. And if you haven't noticed, I'm going by startup ADP. So, and I'm going to order these in a different kind of range where if I had these in my order of preference, I would move them around. The next guy, according to ADP that I'm into, I'll show you here 1 second. That's Mr. Rhamondre Stevenson. Now, hear me out. Everything fell apart last year. Injury, the situation was awful. The line couldn't block. Like we saw the quarterback situation. It was atrocious with Rhamondre. He was below his expected punts per game. The 2 years like previously of that, he was above his expected punts per game. So that's why he was diminished. We've heard the coaching staff already talk about they see Rhamondre Stevenson as one of the best backs in the NFL. On top of it, this is a new offensive scheme, a new offensive staff. Like they got new pieces. They have new people making plays. It's not a Bill Belichick team anymore. They have Alex Van Pelt there. They are going to absolutely run the ball because that's what Alex Van Pelt loves to do. He's coming from Cleveland, and I think this works for Stevenson. And I know people still have a thing for Antonio Gibson, but Antonio Gibson is not fundamentally sound, and this is why he was ran out of Washington. Because Brian Robinson, fundamentally sound dude. Antonio Gibson makes a ton of mistakes. He's a wide receiver trying to play running back. He's never mastered the running back part. So this is kind of why he wore his time out in there. What I expect him to do is I expect him to spell Rhamondre because he came out last year and the year before Rhamondre was like, yeah, I like wore down 2 years ago. So like he kind of wore down as the season went on. He dealt the injury last year and it significantly hurt him. I still like him because you're getting him cheaper. Now, Rhamondre's not young. He's a little bit older. But if we look at his production, it's not been bad. He has not been a bad player in the NFL. Now, his career average, 4.5 yards per carry. If you look at his overall targets, he had 88 in 2022. Last year, he had 51 in 23 in 12 games. So it's not necessarily bad. I think this is the type of player you can buy. And given that he's only 25, there's a little bit of a resale window for him as well because people are going to look at him. They're like, oh, he's not 28. He's 25 right now. So that means he's still on the younger end. Like he's not young, but he's in that prime age window where he's not past kind of the age apex. So he's still in it. So I still think he has a couple of good years. And the one thing we've talked about with New England, with the non-South, where they come out, they're talking about possibly extending Rhamondre Stevenson. If they do that, that means he's insulated and his value would just go up just based on that, based on how the running back market is. So there's a little bit of upside for Rhamondre on both counts where like he can get the value boost due to the contract where teams are looking at it. And then if he plays similar to what he did in 2022 as opposed to 2023, you're getting a guy who can be a top 12 running back for you, no problem. Because we look at the running backs outside of those early guys, it's real dicey. And this is what I talked about. And this is where you get guys like Raheem Mostert or Kyron Williams. They come in out of nowhere. Now, Rhamondre is obviously not coming out of nowhere. I think those guys are really rare on how that happens. Sometimes injuries happen. This happened with Jeff Wilson last year in Miami. If everyone remembers last year, before Devon Achane like stepped on the field, they were talking about, and before they even drafted him, right? It was Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, and there was heated battles debated in the Dynasty offseason where it's like, is it Jeff Wilson? Is Raheem Mostert? We actually don't know. And obviously, Jeff Wilson got hurt. It was a mysterious injury. Nobody knew at the time, but we should have paid more attention to it. It opened up the world in a really good offense. The one thing I do like in the Patriots offense is with basically Jacoby Brissett, Drake May, they brought in actually decent weapons. Like I think Javon Baker has some upside. I really like Jalen Polk. They have a good slot wide receiver in Pop Douglas. They have actual NFL quality pieces. This room is not as bad as it looks. I know we're kind of holding on to what Belichick did with the last few years where it was just notoriously just awful offensive stuff, where it was like Jacoby Myers was the only guy. Now they bring in Pop Douglas, similar thing. I think they're actually moving in the right direction. They fit really well with Drake May. I think it may take a little while with Drake May, but specifically when we get towards playoff time, towards the end of the season, Rhamondre Stevenson could be rolling down the stretch for your team as Drake May starts rolling and going on because the talent is there with Drake May. There are question marks about him playing and when he goes, but when he steps on the field, like he could elevate that offense. And I think that's kind of the untapped thing with this Patriots offense in general. The entire offense is really cheap. So if you want to get in an offense that we look back going into next year in 2025, we're like, man, that Patriots offense was a lot better than we thought. I think there's upside for there. And particularly like Rhamondre Stevenson, like the dude they're not afraid to give him the rock. That's the one thing when you're projecting volume for Stevenson, I could see him pushing up towards 20 touches a game. Now, maybe you're in on Gibson, and if you want to throw the dart on Gibson, he's basically free in Dynasty. Go do that with Gibson. personally, like, I'm done with the Gibson experience. I think he's more going to be like a kick returner, basically a third down specialist for this team, and in that kind of role. And who knows with him? We've seen with Gibson, like, he's got to be like, he needs that floor level to raise. It's just is too in between. It's all over the place. So I really like Rhamondre Stevenson in that range. Now we're gonna get into a younger back here, which I don't understand why this guy is so cheap. This is the one guy when I was looking at Dynasty ADP, I'm like, what are we doing here, folks? Now this will be the fourth guy I'm gonna talk about right here. This is Tyjae Spears, a guy who I'm absolutely head over heels with, because if we look back going in before they signed Tony Pollard, everybody was like, oh, Tyjae Spears, RB1, it's going to happen. What did they do? They signed Tony Pollard, and all of a sudden people are like, no, it's not happening. And I'm like, whoa, time out. Can we take a step back here? But let's focus. He's RB26 right now in Dynasty Startups, according to Dynasty Data Lab. Going in the late 9th round, mid to late second round. If I can get Tyjae Spears for freaking mid to late seconds, absolutely smash that price, because there's upside with Tyjae Spears. Now, this depends on how you feel about Tony Pollard, and people are still holding on to Tony Pollard. Dude, Tony Pollard was not good last year. He was nowhere near. If we look at efficiency measures, Tyjae Spears blew him out of the water. Like missed tackles, forced breakaway, run rate, juke rate, all these things for Tyjae Spears. And like these long runs, Tyjae Spears was through the roof. He was one of the better backs in a limited role. Now, he only had a 30% opportunity share. His snap share was like 50. Like he still needs to show that he can do a little bit more. But we've seen in college, like the guy could absolutely ball out. I think in his limited role that he'd likely start the season out, if he's splitting work with Tony Pollard, he could show off his efficiency like he did with Derrick Henry. Like what I talked about Derrick Henry with the Titans offense. The thing with Spears is Spears was super efficient as a rusher in that offense too. So like it did not diminish Spears. Like he was awesome. Now it is a smaller workload, so we have to project a little bit out for him. But if you're telling me I can bet on the second-year running back, who, by the way, second-year running backs see a massive jump in overall production. Like that's what we want to see for Tyjae Spears. I know they signed Tony Pollard. They like Tony Pollard, but like Tony Pollard was inefficient last year in a really good offensive situation. Like his expected points per game were way higher. He just tanked on touchdowns. Excuse me one second. So if you look at it with Tyjae Spears compared to Tony Pollard, like, and I looked at redraft ADP, Tony Pollard's going ahead of Tyjae Spears, and I'm like pulling my lack of hair out, right? I was just like, what are we doing here, folks? I don't understand this. Like the market should be flipped on those two guys. Spears also had a 14% target share last year, and this was with Will Levis and all the situations they were dealing with. Like, I think the way it works out for Spears is there's serious contingent upside, specifically if an injury happens to Pollard, or if he's just better and he outplays Pollard, which I expect him to do. Like, where we're getting him in a redraft, he's basically outside the top 30 running backs. I just don't understand what's going on. Out of the top 26 dynasty running backs, like, dude, this guy's really good. And there is potential, like, upside for him to be a lot better, because this is another offense that people are uncertain. What did Tennessee do? They improved the offensive line. What else did they do? They brought in a ton of skill position players. They brought in Calvin Ridley. They also brought in Tyler Boyd. They still have Chigakonkwo, who's like a yak specialist, like who could do a little bit, but he's basically the fourth or fifth guy in this offense, right? Seattle Hopkins is Calvin Ridley, and then it's the running backs. So I think this is going to go. So maybe you're big on Tyler Boyd. I think Tyler Boyd's just kind of a guy at this point in his career. He's not who he was previously. So he could play that like complimentary slot role for you. What it does is this allows Spears to not be so honed in on the offense, because if you actually have competent wide receivers, which I love Treylon Burks, it's just not happening for him there, unfortunately. Pour one out for Treylon, man. Like, sorry, buddy, but there's upside for Spears. So if you're getting Spears at this cost, you could also, with the market, it's not just production, like you could resell this guy for a first. He's one of the few guys going in this range where he's young enough, people like him enough. If he shows out this year, you can flip him for a first round pick down the road. Like, that's a guy that you could absolutely do that. You buy in now and he hits, similar to like what we talked about with the Christian Watson in Green Bay. You're chasing upside. Tyjae Spears offers serious upside. So does Christian Watson. So getting him in the 9th round of startups, like, that's a smash pick. Getting him in the late second, like if I'm trading a late second, I'm getting Tyjae Spears. Absolutely. Now, most people's like rookie drafts are already underway or already done. But if your rookie draft is not underway, go see. Like when you get into that basically 206 range, I'm fine offering Tyjae Spears for that pick, because that's kind of the cutoff after like the Ricky Pearsalls and Michael Penix. Like right there, that's where that happens. Then you get in the tier of like, I like Jalen Polk, but I would send Jalen Polk for him, no problem. Like, I'm like, here, you want Jalen Polk? Take him. You want Blake Corum? Take him. You want Trey Benson, even though he goes above, I don't agree with that ADP. I'll send Trey Benson. Because like, what are you hoping Trey Benson becomes, right? So you're hoping Trey Benson does what Tyjae Spears did in year 1 and he takes over in year 2. So similarly set, like, why not just give me the guy I know is good? And maybe you want to make the case that it's the Arizona offense and it's a good offense. And yeah, it's a good offense. But I just think Tyjae Spears is a better back overall. And the situation is opening up for him. So at where he's going in Dynasty and just thinking, like, I think he's a really good pick because the insulation is going to be there for him. And there's contingent upside. And the way we look at it all for this again is there's just multiple outs on Tyjae Spears. So he's the guy that really stands out if we're talking about younger backs. Now, there is one other back I want to talk about before we kind of get into the dart throw, like the real like sleeper backs, the guys that are going well down, like in round 15 and beyond. There's one other back I want to talk about. This is a guy that I don't get why he's going where he's going. Now, it's Brian Robinson. I know you see B Robinson. It's not Bijan. It's Brian Robinson. My whole issue with Eckler is he was atrocious last year. Now, if you want to write it off to say it was the injury, by all means. But Brian Robinson was better across the board, better PFF grade. As a rusher, as a receiver, he was more efficient than Austin Eckler. And he was healed from getting shot. Like, remember, he got shot. He's come back. Like, he was good last year. He basically kicked Antonio Gibson out of Washington. They're like, nah, dude, like, this is my job. I think there's stink on Brian Robinson, and I don't fully understand why. This is the whole thing. Now you're getting him in a Jaden Daniels offense. There's a quarterback upgrade because we've seen the Sam Howell. Now I know like one of my co-hosts on our FFU channel, Aaron said Ennis loves Sam Howell. I think Sam Howell is not very good, and people are talking about him pushing Geno Smith, and I'm like, get out of here, Sam Howell needs worked in time to develop. With Jaden Daniels, there's upside. I get it. The one thing that rookie quarterbacks helps them out is a running back. This is Brian Robinson. They're going to lean on Brian Robinson to help Jaden Daniels develop because I get it. He's a little bit older, Jaden Daniels, but still, like, you're still a rookie quarterback. You need time to develop. Similar to like I was talking about with Drake May when he takes over. Same thing with Rhamondre Stevenson. They're going to lean on these running backs in these offenses, right? Because they don't want to air it out like they did last year. Like, I don't think that's how they really want to play in Washington. Now, it gets interesting with the whole Brandon Ayuk situation. If it is Brandon Ayuk, along with Terry McLaurin, this offense is wheels up. This offense becomes one of the better offenses in the NFL. Jaden Daniels has top 5 potential. You know, the running back in this room that has it is Brian Robinson. Now, if you prefer Austin Eckler, go get it. The whole thing is, when I was talking about Dalvin Cook earlier, it's the same thing with Austin Eckler. Once we see the signs of decline, I really have a hard time believing that running back's going to bounce back and show it. We saw a monumental drop-off from Austin Eckler last year. He was living off of volume. He massively underperformed expectations. This is what happens with these older backs. And maybe I love Austin Eckler. Like, he's one of the biggest proponents of fantasy football there is. Like, I think he's great, but I think Brian Robinson at this point in his career is just a better back. So what I'm doing is I'm betting in a guy that's being discounted because he's in what they call an ambiguous backfield. The way it shakes out with projections, I have Brian Robinson well above Austin Eckler when you do projections. He's the guy that comes out, and I was like, whoa, that's a major difference because I wasn't sure until I kind of did the projections, and I was like, all right, man, yeah, like, give me Brian Robinson. We look at Brian Robinson this last 2 years into the league. So he played 15 games last year. He played 12 games the year before. He still had over 200 touches both season. The guy's been efficient. He had 43 targets last year. That's the one thing where people are like, this guy he's not going to be a check down guy. Guess what? He saw 43 targets. That's nothing to sneeze at. And it wasn't bad. His yard perception is over 10. That's some of the good numbers in the NFL. Like, I think there is upside for Brian Robinson in this offense, specifically where he's going. I like him in a redraft, which means if you like somebody in a redraft, you're going to like him in Dynasty. So you're getting him late. We're talking round 11 here, round 12. For an early third round pick for the most part, people don't like Brian Robinson. Now, if he takes hold of this offense, which is this is the bull case for Brian Robinson. The guy that could come out of nowhere and be a impact for your league winner, that's Brian Robinson. Now, I know we talk about having stake on his name, but volume is king. I think there's a chance he literally pushes 60+% of the touches in the running back room, and that's how you become RB1 in fantasy. Now you need some touchdown luck and everything like that. The one thing when I was talking about with Derrick Henry, this is also with Jaden Daniels. I don't expect them to give it to Jaden Daniels to rush around the goal line because they want to keep him healthy because he's frail. He's skinny. He is not what we talk about with Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts or those guys. He is skinny. He's barely over 200 pounds. He's 6'4". So this is kind of the thing, right? Where you want to keep this quarterback healthy. So you don't want to put him in danger. So what they're going to do, they're going to be like, all right, 3rd and 4 at basically 4 yards to go on the goal line. Like, they'll give it to Brian Robinson there, or, you can catch a check down for a touchdown that way. So I think there are multiple outs for Brian Robinson at his ADP. When we get these discounted ADPs, it's really easy for these guys to jump up and massively beat their expectations with ADP. So of the guys that I think are really easy to buy that are still young, Brian Robinson, he's not old. He's only going into age 25. Like, this is the thing with Brian Robinson. So he just turned 25 a few months ago. Like, he's young enough where he could live out that rookie contract. He's still got another year of his rookie contract because he wasn't a round 1 pick. So you get the 4 years, right? So he has this year and he has next year before they have to make a decision on what to do with Brian Robinson. So I think if we're looking at a year from now, like there's a way Brian Robinson could gain multiple rounds of ADP and be a guy you could either sell off for profit or you could ride for production. I think his ADP stands out as well. Like I think him and Spears are the two cheap guys that I really like at their cost where there is upside. Now I like the older guys. We talk about Henry. We talk about some of the older guys. What I wanted you to focus now is on there are two guys left that I have not talked about. If you have been paying attention to our FFU channel, if you've been paying attention to what we've been saying on the show, you know who these two guys are going to be. These are my two late round dart throws and drafts that are going incredibly late because I think there's theoretical upside in their situations. Now, the first guy I want to talk about, his ADP is a little bit higher, as I expect it to be. Now, if you're torn between these guys, I'll let you know. It's Kimani Vidal. Now, this is my late round, one of the two late round sleeper dart throws I'm talking about that they have upside attached to their name. He's RB 46. He's going in the 14th round startup. It's a mid third round pick. It costs you nothing to get Kimani Vidal. You could flip him for a player, like a third round pick of a player. So if you want to go look at some veterans for cheap and you're like, you know what, I'm going to send him for Kimani Vidal because people will be looking to get out on this guy early because unless he hits, they're going to be like, all right, sell him. So we go down. We'll look round 14, right? We're talking like the Rashid Shaheed range. We're talking Javon Baker. We're talking about Kai Corley. Jerome Ford, if I could flip him for, actually, interestingly enough, he goes right around Gus Edwards. So if I could flip him for those guys, absolutely, I'm taking that shot. Because what I like specifically in the Chargers offense, we have seen this with Greg Roman talk about, he made a reference to talking about running through a brick wall back in 2013. That reference came up this offseason since he signed up in the OC. What does that mean? He's going to run these guys into the ground. They're looking for someone, they said, they could get up to 300 touches in the season. I don't see that being Gus Edwards because Gus Edwards has never been a receiving back. The interesting thing is J.K. Dobbins. If J.K. Dobbins is healthy and the player he was, but you're counting on a guy who blew out his ACL, significant ACL and MCL injury last year. It was not a simple ACL, remember? It was multiple. Then the Achilles goes, and it's like, man, it's just not happening for Dobbins. Now, they clearly like Dobbins because of his connections to Baltimore and Greg Roman, but like, they're really trying to wish cash it with Dobbins. So what you're doing with Kimani Vidal is you're getting the guy that likely steps into that receiving role to start out with his team because they've already mentioned like his receiving skill set. And if you look at his stats in college, like Kimani Vidal is nothing to sneeze at. He had basically 257 total touches his junior year, 1,200 total yards. He had 26 receiving receptions, right? His senior year, it elevated. He had 315 touches for 1,800 plus yards. He had another 18 receptions. The guy was absolutely balling out in his office. Now, I get it. He was at Troy, so that you have to take those numbers with a little bit of grain of salt. But the person who really put me onto Kimani Vidal is Matt Waldman. And Matt Waldman talks about him being in that same archetype of like DeAndre Swift and those type of players, right? That are immensely talented, but they have issues with their vision. He thinks the difference is like when you watch Vidal, like you don't see those same issues that shows up on Swift where they have like really just bad vision. I think he actually has better vision to fit what they want to do in this Greg Roman run offense. So I really like Kimani Vidal. I think there's upside because on top of this with Gus Edwards, he's dealing with lower body injury on top of it too. So Kimani Vidal has a chance to step in right in camp and really assert himself from the moment on and make it so they don't take him off the field. Now, do I think that's the most likely role? No, he's the day 3, a late day 3 pick. Like I'm not saying he's guaranteed a role, but I think he will get himself a role and be good enough where he does something to stand out from Gus Edwards. And with the issue with J.K. Dobbins, like I need to see it similar to Nick Chubb in Cleveland. Like I need to see this guy back before I'm willing to invest anything in him. I'm letting other people draft him. So that means I'm targeting the other running backs in those places, right? We saw this last year with Baltimore. They were so reliant on Gus Edwards and what he was doing because they had nothing else. Now they have a decent running back with the Chargers. And we've seen Harbaugh in his years. They're going to run the ball. Like he loved doing it with Frank Gore. And when he was in San Francisco, they're going to do the same thing. So Vidal has a chance. Now, some people will tell you he's small. He's as small as J.K. Dobbins. He's 5'07". J.K. Dobbins 5'09". J.K. Dobbins 209. Kimani Vidal same. He actually weighs a few more pounds. I think he's like 213. So he's basically the same size as J.K. Dobbins. He's got like an inch shorter, maybe 2 inches shorter, but like he's that same build. So like the weird thing is people don't consider Dobbins small back, but Dobbins is a little bit undersized, similar to Vidal. But Vidal is not small like Devon Achane small, or like we talk about these Deuce Vaughn, these smaller guys. He fits in like the kind of prototypical NFL new mold of running back. So I'm really not worried about Kimani Vidal. So if you're talking, I can get him. Sign me up, baby. Like I like that price on Kimani Vidal. So there's one last sleeper back I want to talk about. It is another rookie. So like I said, you know who I'm going to talk about here. This is the 7th and final guy we're going to talk about here. Tyrone Tracy, folks. Tyrone Tracy going running back 57. Start 16th round. Late 16th round on top of that. This is a late third. Tyrone Tracy costs you freaking nothing. And the nice thing about him, I mean, besides the competition or lack of competition there is, it's literally Devin Singletary. I heard someone hyping up Eric Gray, and I'm like, Eric Gray was awful last year. This is why they're bringing in other guys. This is why they brought in Devin Singletary. This is why they drafted Tyrone Tracy. I think the interesting thing with Tracy is he's a former wide receiver player. His time in Iowa before he transferred to Purdue, Tyrone Tracy was a wide receiver. He's a little bit bigger. He's like 5'11", 211 is his size. He's a little bit bigger, more kind of that wide receiver build. So he's like a little bit lankier than, say, our Kimani Vidal. But the guy has good stats throughout his entire career. Like, he's been efficient. He was a wide receiver, though. So, like, he was a deep threat down the field in the Iowa. His first couple of years, he was like 22 yards a catch, 16 yards a catch. It kind of evened out his junior year. Basically, you see him start to shift in 2021. 2022 is when he really shifted to Purdue. And the last 2 years at Purdue, the man basically, he finally came in and they started treating him as a running back. So he's still learning the job. The one thing about Tracy compared to Vidal is he is old. He's 24 years old. He's not young. He's gonna be pushed 25 at some point soon. He's not young. So like the age thing is gonna be a problem for him. But like if we're chasing immediate production from a day 3 back, like I don't really care about that. I just want a guy who makes an impact this year. Now, with both Vidal and Tracy, the floor is 0. Like they might just be nothing burgers, and that's okay. But at this cost, I'm fine taking the darts on these guys because in rookie drafts, I was getting Vidal and Tracy early in the 4th and 5th rounds. Now their rookie ADP has corrected. They're going in the 3rd, and I had to take Kimani Vidal like the 212 one of my drafts came in. I was fine to do that. But I knew like you see sleeper ADP, they were well down. They weren't coming up. More rookie drafts we do. We see them kind of rise because people like the situations. I mean, his only competition is Devin Singletary. I don't think there's anyone else in competition, right? So the thing with Devin Singletary, similar to Gus Edwards, is he's a solid NFL back. So these guys do need to stand out, but these guys are not elite players. Like we see them, they don't do anything specific. We're like, oh my God, this guy's an incredible running back. Like, no, these guys do stuff well. This is why they're on rosters. This is why teams sign them. We kind of saw Singletary rebirth last year with Houston, where he just shined up. And it's like, oh, Devin Singletary was like, hey, by the way, I'm NFL quality running back. I'm still here. You saw it in Houston. He was better. So I think it's really interesting with these two guys. And let's see. Yeah, not this time, Aaron. But hey, tomorrow. We can do it tomorrow. You know what I'm talking about? It'll be a fun time. Yeah, exactly. Like Rachaad White, like the age thing. I think it's really interesting with these guys, like in age. I'm not too worried about age if you could produce, to tell you the truth. It does impact their market and like perceived market value, particularly with Tyrone Tracy, because dude's gonna be old. Like, but if he can produce and step in and be an impactful player throughout his rookie contract, by the way, Tyrone Tracy is basically making peanuts. Same with Kimani Vidal. They cost nothing, so these teams can just run these guys out there, don't have to worry about investing significant capital. This is the bonus thing with these late day, like these round 3 or day 3 picks, right? The running back positions. Now, obviously, they're not tethered to them long term, but we're not talking about long term. We're talking about for 2024. This is why these are my dart throws. And I'm like, listen, with these guys, I'm not expecting what I'm expecting from the other 5 guys, excuse me. With these 2 guys, these are the traditional dart throws. These were in the Raheem Mostert. These were in the Kyren Williams range last year. So if you're looking for guys like that to target, that's what we want to do. We want to find running back situations with uncertainty, or with perceived running backs that are not what we would call difference maker running backs. They're just guys, right? And if injury happens, then yeah, exactly. So and this is what I'm talking about, right? So it's a 2-year window, and this is how I treat running backs in general, with a few exceptions. There's like the Bijans, the Breeses, the Gibbs, all those guys. I think outside of them, we got to stop like overvaluing these young running backs, like I said, with Ken Walker or Travis Etienne, because if you're not giving me difference making production, why am I ranking you as top 12 running back? It makes no sense to me. So like with the Derrick Henry, the market's only going to value him at a certain point, so I'm taking that with my rankings, but I don't really care. I'm going to treat this guy like, you have to pay me to get Derrick Henry, because if I'm a contender, which is like he's that contender by, like that's what we call a hammer, and he's going to be a good player for you. So I think with these 2 rookies in general, though, these are the 2 late round rookies. I think the cost to acquire them is a lot better than it is like a Marshawn Lloyd with the Packers, because people are seeing a Trey Benson. Like those 2 guys, they have competition. Like the thing about James Conner, and the whole reason why I did put James Conner in here, is because I am a little worried about Trey Benson. I think he can have an impact, but I think it's likely similar to what we saw with Rachaad White as a rookie. Like both of those guys are kind of playing a role, and they kind of handicapping each other. The thing about the Bucks in that year is Brady threw it 8,000 times, so they both were fantasy relevant. Leonard Fournette was I think he's a top 8 running back that year. And I think Rachaad White was like top 20-ish running back there. Both guys were good. It's just, I don't think they're going to throw that much in Arizona this year. I don't think they're going to make, hey, Kyler, can you throw it 750 times? So, and with Green Bay, it's interesting, right? It's just, I like Josh Jacobs. It really depends how you feel about Marshawn Lloyd. I think he has a really low floor because of his vision issues that we talk about, similar to DeAndre Swift, and why I'm not really big on DeAndre Swift, even though that offense is good. But like with these late round running backs, these are 2 guys I'm targeting. So we're gonna do this real quick. We're gonna run back, and I'm gonna show you guys what I'm talking about. So Tyrone Tracy, the last guy I'm talking about, round 16, he's basically a peanuts late 3rd round pick. The other rookie running back that's super cheap, 14th round startup, mid 3rd round pick, Kimani Vidal. It might cost a little bit more because people are kind of getting hung on Kimani Vidal. I really like him. Now we get into the veteran running backs that I'm talking about buying that have upside. I'm talking about Brian Robinson, RB 34, 11th round, early 3rd, late 2nd. That's not that much. I like him. He's a good price. There's upside for you. And maybe you could flip this with Eckler. Maybe Eckler's your guy. I don't think it's Eckler, but same situation, right? Same type of toss. Now, yeah, this is the guy I'm the most bullish on of all of these guys as far as market value is Tyjae Spears. I think he can actually gain substantial value. The mid to late 2nd round pick, RB 26, now round 9, like that's a steal cost. There's significant market value attached to him, which is a little bit different than everyone else. Brian Robinson to a point, but Tyjae Spears is a whole other ballgame. He's cheaper. There's theoretical higher upside. I think he's a better player. He's the true like elite talent of those guys, and that's what I want to invest into. Rhamondre Stevenson, a guy that's kind of just stuck in this middle range because people don't know how to treat him because of how bad last year was. So Rhamondre Stevenson, he's another guy. 8th round starter pick, mid 2nd. Not going to cost you a lot. If you can get him, go get Rhamondre Stevenson. Now we're getting to the impact veterans, the couple guys I'm talking about. I'm talking about Joe Mixon here, RB 19, late round 7, early 2nd. Mixon is strictly contender buy. So these 2 guys I'm talking about, Joe Mixon and the RB1 that started out, and ADP Derrick Henry. These are the strict contender buys. Rhamondre, Tyjae, they're not, and Brian Robinson are not strictly contender buys because they have theoretical a little bit more upside. Rhamondre is a little bit less, but in that range. Henry and Mixon are strictly contender buys. But I think all of these guys can make an impact for you and your running back room in 2024 because that's what we're talking about here, folks, because this is what the show is all about. Running backs who can be league winners for you. And specifically with league winners, you want all of those guys. And I think Aaron makes a good point here. Yep. Because it's the Stone Cold, baby. But that's our episode 2 of the Fantasy Lowdown with the FFU, the Fantasy Football Universe. I want to thank y'all for joining me on this episode today. Shocker, we pushed in 48 minutes. This is what we do here, folks. I am long-winded. I will happily tell you that. If you want it, you sit back, relax, you have a good time with me because I can do this for hours with you. So anyways, make sure to check out all of our content. We'll have a show coming out tomorrow. We'll have a show coming out the next day, all on the Fantasy Football Universe YouTube page. There's stuff coming out on TikTok. We have our articles, more dropping articles where Aaron was comparing ADP on versus Sleeper and Yahoo. We have our rookie profiles coming out. A lot of things we're just doing. We're going to start putting out articles on league formats and describing those league settings, then have Fantasy Football Universe associated leagues with those. So those will be fun to check out. Those will be dropping soon. We're also going to be doing giveaways with the Rainbow Bowl. We've already done our Scott Fish Bowl giveaway. We're going to be doing one with the Warrior Bowl. We might be hooking up with a couple other places and doing some more of those. But for the Fantasy Lowdown, I am your host, Jesse Moeller. Make sure you like and subscribe because I appreciate anybody who does that. You help us out as content creators. So if you all could do that, that would be very beneficial to us because that makes our world and life a lot easier. So for the rest of the guys, for Aaron, for SC, for Jeremy, I am Jesse Moeller. Thank you all for joining me, and we'll see you next week on episode 3 of the Fantasy Lowdown. And I hope y'all have a good rest of your day.